you also have to be able to have seen someone when things are not going well for them, right? And when I say not going well, it's like really not going well, because that's really, sometimes when people are not getting what they want, that's how you really know who they are, right? And if you're able to not be a good human being because life is not going well for you, then maybe you're not generally speaking, you know, on average level, a good person. Hey, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I read another novel. It's called The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I really love this book so much. It's by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Sometimes I read books where I'm like struggling to really get through it. I have a book that I've been reading for 2 years. I'm not even gonna lie to you. I pick it up, and every single time I pick it up, I'm like, oh my god, I cannot do this. This is so boring. I just really struggle to follow. This was not one of them. I think it was like maybe when I was on a plane or something, the book was still starting the scene. So it's about this older woman who calls some allegedly unknown person who is in a magazine that she wants to do an article with her. The girl then gets, surprisingly, how like this older woman is like, I would say like really like, imagine like a veteran actress like from back in the day who had, when they were in the game, they were in the game. Do you know what I mean? And they were really popular, but they're a lot older now, and they want to, I think she was doing like an auction for dresses or something like that, and she randomly decides to send an email to this magazine company. I think the company is called Vivance or something like that, and request for this person specifically. And the girl was like, I don't get since when. But anyway, the girl decides to go and acknowledge the woman's request, and she thinks, oh, she's going in to just do an article with this woman, only to get there and find out that this woman wants her to write her autobiography. Yeah, autobiography. And the girl does some calculations in her head that if this thing is actually true, by the time I released this autobiography, it was going to be worth like millions of dollars at that point. But the woman's only requirement is that the girl can only release it when she when the woman, Evelyn Hugo that is, when she dies. And you know, it's just in the beginning when the woman was just telling the girl that oh yeah, like this is what I want you to do, this is why I'm calling you here. There was an advice that she said that literally I had to pause. There's so many moments in this book where the woman says something and I literally have to stop and like really think about it. So at this point where the woman is telling her about the book and the fact that she's going to write an autobiography and it's going to be worth a lot of money, Monique was like, oh, I'm not sure. The woman is like, you have to, if you decide to do this, that you have to make sure that you get the best deal for this book, like you get the most amount of money you can. She says, you have a once in a lifetime opportunity, Monique, you can see that, right? Monique says, of course. And then she said, so do yourself a favor and learn how to grab life by the balls, dear. Don't be so tired of trying to do the right thing when the smart thing is so painfully clear. I took a moment and I thought, let me just digest it. Let me just take it all in. And I think that it's gonna be so hard to even talk about this book because there were just so many things. Like the woman had so many gems that she would always come up with that you would just think, rah, like wow, that is very true. It's like old wisdom. Do you know what I mean? When you're talking to like an older person who has seen life, that has seen the things inside life, and she has come out of it. So anyway, as the book says, the name of the book says 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. It's actually more about her career. There's a bit in there, there's a lot of categorizing basically based on the husband she was married and what was happening at that time, but I just feel like her life was just generally so interesting even outside of the men she was marrying, and the reason why she was marrying these many men, we later got to find out, was that, spoiler alert, because she was in love with a woman. And back in those days, when it was 1920s, it's Pride, I think they just finished Pride Parade like this weekend. That would definitely not have happened in the 20s. So she had to go through so many relationships just to mask, or to so many marriages just to mask that, you know, she was married to, or she was in love with a woman who was also a very popular actress. So to talk about her 7 husbands, I think some of them are not really worth mentioning. Like the first one, sorry, I think his name was Ernie. He was someone that she used to get out of her situation. So she was born in a really bad place. I think it was called Hell's Kitchen. Obviously I don't know where that is. I think somewhere in the US. and she's Spanish speaking, so I assumed that she was a bit brown, like she was Latina basically, not like really really brown, but like, you know, just a little bit, from the way that the book described her as well. She was really beautiful, and that was one thing that keeps getting mentioned in the book. But anyway, she got married to this guy. I wasn't even paying attention to that marriage, because at that point the book hadn't even gotten that interesting. I was just like, okay, she's married now, what's going on? But her dad was physically abusive. I'm not sure if it was just physically, but he was abusive. And then her mom died, and she really had to get out of where she was, so she basically left the town, somehow got married to this guy, and then somehow did a lot of things. Managed to get herself into like Hollywood. She talked about how there was a lot of her using her body as a tool to do that in a lot of this moving up and climbing up the ladder and getting out of you know, her situation. And I like how she was able to, when she talks about her life, she talks about it without any regrets. Really, she was just like, yeah, she had to learn from when she was really young that if you basically wanted favor from men who obviously were in positions of power at that point in her life, that she just kind of knew what she had to do, and so she did. And I think that's the reality for a lot of people, a lot of women, especially people who are in, you know, bad places, where you're trying to get out of somewhere, and sometimes it just feels like, you know, that's not like it's the only way out, but it's not the easiest way out either, because you definitely can't say that's easy, but it is a way out. And where you're in somewhere where you're so desperate you can do anything, you literally will and can do anything. And I like how she later on in the book talks about how that affected her, because for her, like, sex has always been transactional, right? It's just always been, yep, this, I need something from this person, I need something from this brand, this company, this is the CEO of this company or whatever it is, so I'm going to do XYZ, or let him do XYZ to me because I know that's going to give me B, right? And then when she actually fell in love with the second husband, whose name was Don Harper, is it Don Harper? I believe so. And how she found it weird and interesting and like unique, basically, to be wanting to have sex for a different reason other than the fact that she wants something in return for that. So yeah, she was really in love with her second husband, Don, and he was a really popular person. His parents were really popular, and it made sense. At that time she was just starting out in Hollywood, so it made sense for her to be going out with him basically, and that was what she did. But he was charming. I feel like women like charming men, don't ask me questions, but I feel like, yeah, he was charming, and she sort of fell for his charms because he was a really lovely man, and they got married very quickly. And then his career started not going so well because he was also an actor, and then he started physically abusing her. I just found it, again, like, it's such a window, like, because sometimes when people have people who are like physically abusing them, like, you think, oh, like, why aren't you leaving, why aren't you? But it's like the way that she paints the picture, it's just so, it's not like it's clear, but you can really see it, how it's not necessarily the easiest thing to do to sort of break out of that cycle. And obviously he would do it and then apologize and do a really big grand gesture as an apology for what he'd done. And at some point, like, he didn't even realize, you know, when he would hit her, and it like became, you know, part of like the whole cycle, and then she puts on makeup, you know, and everything. But in that time when her marriage was sort of like going down the drain, she started to develop a friendship with a co-star called Celia St. James, who was in a movie called Little Women. This is actually a real movie that I've seen, and I know that the one that I saw recently was like a remake of one that was there before. So that's why it made me feel like this book was being written about somebody who actually existed, but apparently it's just fiction. But anyway, she was the co-star. She started to fall in love with her, started to develop a friendship. At that point, she realizes that Celia is really just purely like into women, whereas she, Evelyn, obviously was in love with her husband, but she was starting to develop feelings for Celia. At some point, Evelyn finds out that her husband is cheating, and then decides to leave her husband because, yeah, he was cheating on her. And I found it interesting that all the time when he was hitting her, she didn't leave, and it only really occurred to her to leave when he was actually cheating on her. And I just found that so interesting. That was one of the things that kind of threw me off. I was just like, oh, okay. Like I said, that she had so many gems in the book where she would just talk about just some very real things. And one of the things that really hit me was when she said about how she wasn't heartbroken when that marriage ended. She just felt like a failure. And she was saying this to Monique, who was the person who she was, you know, verbally narrating her autobiography, because Monique was also going through a divorce herself. And she was just basically trying to make a point that when something is ending or has ended, you need to be able to make a distinction why you feel sad. Because sometimes when you feel sad, or even when you feel happy, or in this case, let's stick with sad, when you feel sad that something has ended, are you sad because you're heartbroken because you really love this person? Or are you sad because, you know, is that sadness because, you know, you feel like a failure, especially in the case of a marriage where you go in thinking love of my life, it's going to go on till the end, and then that doesn't happen, and that sadness, it can feel the same. But I think it's very, very important to make a distinction between the sadness of being heartbroken versus the sadness of every other thing, which could have been failure, it could be fear of being alone, it could be, you know, whatever it is. So when I read that, I literally again had to just take a step back and thinking, whew, wow, that is so, it's so, it's just, I just love how much clarity Evelyn had about her relationships and the men that she was with, and how she, again, I don't know if that clarity came from in retrospect, like old age basically, or if she felt that level of clarity in the moment. But it was so beautiful seeing how clear she was about these men and why this has ended, or why I had to do this, like the decisions that she was making. In that relationship with Don, there was also something else that she said that really stuck with me, because Don started hitting her when he started doing badly in his career. And she said something of basically be careful of a man who has something to prove. I feel like a lot of people are emotionally connected to their success, and when they're not doing well, like, you have to be wary about people who are emotionally connected to their success, that if that doesn't go well for them, F everybody else basically. And they're not able to see clearly in that moment, and so he would hit her, and she just became like a small thing in his world of him trying to be this great person. And the most important thing to him in his life was that, oh, this was not going well for me. And the relationship that he had with her just was like, yeah, whatever. So yeah, she was like, yeah, be careful of men who basically have something to prove. And I think that goes for maybe men, maybe women as well. But yeah, you have to, it's a trait that you have to really look out for people who are just so like headstrong about. And the funny thing is, it's quite tricky to pick, right? Because to pick out, because she was also saying that you also have to be able to have seen someone when things are not going well for them, right? And when I say not going well, it's like really, really not going well, because that's really, sometimes when people are not getting what they want, that's how you really know who they are, right? And if you're able to not be a good human being because life is not going well for you, then maybe you're not, generally speaking, you know, on average level, a good person. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, it was one of those ones where I just sat down and just thought to myself, yeah, that was straight facts. Anyway, she moves on to marry this guy called, I can't even remember at some point the different husbands. I'm not even going to lie to you. So she and Celia, obviously, the woman, they'd realized that obviously they're together, they were seeing each other quite a lot, but there starts to be like some speculation in the papers and everything that, oh, you guys are in a relationship. And she had this really great plan in her mind of this guy who, I think he was a singer or an actor, I'm not sure, but he was really popular in the limelight. And because there started to be some rumors about her being with a woman, she crafted this plan, and she was very crafty. She was very good at like fixing things and like making things happen basically. So yeah, because she was scared that they were going to find out that she was into women being Celia, she decided to go and marry this man who was this really popular actor. And after marrying him, on the night after, during their like on the night, because again, this is like really back in the day, so you have to take that into account, right? So she couldn't really get married to him until, she couldn't really sleep with the guy until they got married, and so she kind of pulled him along, and then they got married in Vegas. After the marriage in Vegas, she then basically slept with the guy, and she made sure that it wasn't good. She like, and that's the thing about her being like very manipulative. So she made sure that it wasn't good, and it's basically like see finish. So by the time that he'd married her in Vegas, he slept with the guy and everything, and he realized that, oh, like she wasn't really all that like he thought. Then he called for an annulment, so that was then her third husband. The problem with this plan was that she didn't tell this woman, Celia, in this plan that she was actually going to sleep with a guy. And so when Celia found out, because Celia is very much only into women, whereas Evelyn, as she came to find out, was bisexual. So she had relationships obviously with men, and she had obviously her feelings for Celia. Celia, I think, was the only woman actually that she actually loved. So yeah, Celia didn't know that there was going to be some extracurricular affairs going down between she and this guy in this her grand plan. And when she found out, she was really heartbroken, and they broke up. And yeah, after that, like, it was quite interesting, that breakup with Celia as well. She said something how at that point that she didn't know that you were allowed, not you were allowed, but she didn't know that you should and you could grovel, was the word she used, for somebody that you love, right? Because when Celia walked away, when she found out, because I think she found that actually because she got pregnant. I think that was what happened. Yeah, she got pregnant 2 months after their wedding night, right? The wedding night in Vegas. So when Celia found out that she was having a baby, obviously, which she was gonna take out, yeah, Celia wasn't very happy, and Celia walked away, and she was telling Celia, like, I did this for you, I did this because if I didn't do this, you know, people have been on our necks, we wouldn't have been able to be together. And Celia was like, no, you didn't do this for us, you did this for yourself. And I think in that moment, Evelyn had a realization that she was very much into herself, right? Not to the same extent as her previous husband who was hitting her, but she was also very much like afraid for all of what she had worked hard for to crumble. And so that was why she was always constantly trying to scheme. She was always constantly trying to do all these things to basically make sure that she was never found out, and like her prestige and this whole popularity thing never really crumbled. And that was what Celia had a problem with. And so they broke up, and Celia walked away. So I said that to say, because when Celia walked away that time, she didn't come back for her, she didn't fight for her, she didn't do anything. Basically, she just basically let Celia walk away because she herself, Evelyn, was angry. And I remember her making a statement about how sometimes when you love somebody and something happens, like, it's okay to go after them, especially as a woman. I think it's not always I don't think it's always our first reaction. I'm not sure, maybe this is just me speaking for myself, I don't know, but I feel like it's maybe not necessarily something that you would akin to women to sort of like go out like really trying to get someone back when something doesn't work out. So I thought that was really good that she mentioned that. So anyway, I can't even remember who the next husband was, but she went on to marry. This entire time while she's been in Hollywood, she's been really good friends with this guy called Harry Cameron. And over time, like, he was literally her best friend, like her closest person ever. And she obviously, while she was best friends with him, she got to realize that he was into men, right? He was just into men as well. At some point, she falls in love with this guy. She doesn't fall in love, sorry. She meets this guy who was also trying to come up in his career. His name was Rex, and she basically married him because if people knew that they were together, when they did movies together, like, it would sell. It was basically for money. It was all for like the tabloids basically. And I think the whole book actually really shined what's the English word, really shined a light on the level of fakeness that you can have with like Hollywood situations. Basically, how you can actually just get married to someone because you guys look good together, and you guys are going to create good noise basically around each other, and that would obviously sell, in their case, movies. So yeah, this one was called Rex North. She married him because yeah, they were making movies together. He actually, because she was Evelyn, right, she was a babe at that point, so I think they just had an agreement that they weren't going to do anything with each other. They stayed in the same house but in separate houses, separate parts of the house. But she drops so many gems. Like, I opened the part of this book where she just says, there is a certain freedom in marrying a man when you aren't hiding anything, right? Because with this Rex guy, like, she hadn't told him obviously that she was into women. They knew that it was just a business thing, and they were just getting married for that reason. Although, like, he kind of like pulled the rug under her feet, because eventually the Rex guy, who was supposed to be a player, never got married type of guy, eventually fell in love with some girl and decided that for that marriage to work out, that she had to she had to go. Evelyn had to go. At some point as well, she and Celia came back together after the initial thing, and her BFF Harry, who was really only into men, they decided to have a thing where basically she married her BFF, I believe. Yeah, she married her BFF Harry Cameron, and then Celia married this other guy who was, I believe, also an actor, John Braverman, I think was his name. And so 4 of them. John Braverman is also gay, and he was into Harry, Evelyn's husband, and then obviously Evelyn was into Celia. And so they had like a, what is it when 4 people are in a relationship? I mean, on the outside world, there was just 2 couple married friends, and then people even started assuming that they were swingers. However, obviously their mind didn't go to the fact that they were together because Evelyn liked Celia, Harry liked John. Anyway, in that whole situation, they decided to have a child. They had a child. I believe the name of the child was Connor. So they had a baby girl, and Harry and what's it called again, and Evelyn decided to have that child. And it was interesting because in that moment, obviously, to have a child, you got to get down to business, right? And Celia wasn't comfortable with the fact that, you know, she was going to obviously have to sleep with Harry to obviously get pregnant. And I think the whole thing like really kind of made it interesting, thinking about how there's quite a big difference between people who are bisexual and people who are just maybe, you know, one sex oriented, in this case obviously lesbian. So Celia was just only into women, and Evelyn wasn't. And sometimes Celia really struggled with Evelyn because of that, and she would always judge Evelyn for being with men, because I don't know why. I think it was quite interesting, but I found it interesting that she brought that up. Obviously I'm not allowed, but I'm not one, I don't have the experience to speak of this, but I find that I hear conversations about that a lot of the times where people say, oh, like people who are bisexual, sometimes even within the gay community, struggle because a lot of times people are telling them to pick a side, you know what I mean? So that was quite interesting, and I feel like in a very subtle way the author kind of addressed that, or sort of like talked about it. Evelyn was I think her career had tanked after she divorced her second husband, who was abusing her, and the guy tried to blacklist her from a lot of things, and she really had to do a lot to basically come back into movies. And she basically did a very risque movie because I think later on her ex-husband Don, I think it was Don, yeah, I think it was an ex-husband, decided to come back. The Don guy came back on the clean, and they decided to do a movie together. I think they did 2 movies together. One of the movies, they had to have like a really explicit like sex scene, and she didn't take permission from Celia, I believe, before doing that. And Celia wasn't happy, and I believe that was what broke the camel's back in this case. But there was always so many little things, that were coming up that Celia wasn't happy with, but I think on that occasion the girl was just like, yeah, nah, I'm not doing this, because you clearly don't, like, she was just saying how she wouldn't be enough for her, because for you to go, the first time you already went and slept with this guy because you felt like he's going to cover us from being exposed, and this time around you're going around having these explicit scenes with your ex-husband without my permission. And yeah, she basically left her, and this time left her like for like a really long time. What's her name? Celia's husband John, who they were in a couple together, I think he died, he passed away. And Harry, Evelyn's husband, is so confusing, was really in love with the guy, and really struggled after that. And so their whole relationship, it was just very interesting. Their whole relationship sort of evolved, and then obviously Celia left. And so at some point, I don't even know, I can't remember at what point, that Harry had to divorce, what's her name again, Evelyn. I think they were still married, but at some point Harry was so heartbroken from his the death of that guy that he really likes, that he had to tell Evelyn, like, look, you're allowed to go and love someone else. The sun is really testing and I really have to hurry up. But so when Harry told her that she's allowed to love someone else because he was just a mess and he was really heartbroken, she decided, you know what, you're right. So she went to get married to this guy. I think he was one of the producers who had helped her to bring up her career when her career was struggling, basically. And the guy, who's a French guy, and he allegedly had really adored her all this time and blah blah blah. And she married the guy, and again Finish entered inside because he just loved the fact that he was married to Evelyn Hugo as like this star, right? This person. And again, like I said, there were so many little lessons to learn like from a lot of her marriages and relationships, but this one was just like, wow, like, and the way that he talked about her and the way he's like, oh my god, like from the outside looking in, it's like, oh, this man adores you, but he adored the version of her who was like a successful actress. He liked how she looked on his hand. He was always checking out for the newspapers, like what people are saying about them, and all of this stuff only comes out when you enter inside house. So he was really checking out for what people are saying in the papers about them. And yeah, he was basically in love with the image of her and not herself, really. Yeah, I felt like I really liked that she talked about that, because that happens a lot and people don't see it happening because they really we like the idea of somebody like really being so in love with you, whereas sometimes if you're not like drowned in the ego of someone like adoring you, and you really sometimes look at it, you can often tell that the person likes you externally, not necessarily internally, if that makes sense. And so she married the guy. Obviously that one came out, and then she left him, but she left him because she decided to reconnect with Celia. I think she won an award, or was it somebody won an award, an Oscar or something, and then she decided that she was going to she decided to reconnect. Somehow she and Celia reconnected after like maybe like a decade or so or something of not speaking to each other, which is crazy because they actually really liked themselves a lot. Her relationship with Celia was very interesting to me, purely because I felt like some of the things that Celia said to her, maybe I'm not very tolerant, but like if someone said that to me, I'll be out the door. Like I'm like, yeah, no, immediately no. And Celia at some point like was talked about how like men only liked her for her breasts or something like that. Like it was just like, you are in love with me? Since when? And how are you allowed to say those things about someone that you claim to care about? Like that makes no sense to me, sorry. So yeah, I just felt like Celia, and she talked about it and she knew that this is a character that Celia had. Celia was the kind of person that when you hurt her, she will do you back. Like she's basically going to try and hurt you back with her words, with obviously not physically, but with her words wherever she can. So she was petty and spiteful in that way. And I felt like it was interesting because she just said it like it was just a character that Celia had. I don't necessarily think there is no material there's no material, what's the word I'm looking for, there's no material way of showing that Celia really loved her. Like it didn't materialize in any way. There wasn't, oh, Celia did this for me. When she had a baby, Celia just managed to, she was doing it just because, right? It's Evelyn. But I think in comparison to maybe some of her husbands, where it feels like there was something, maybe this is just my perspective, with the men she married, there was something that made her marry the guys, right? Because the men were fulfilling something, or we were doing something for her, or fulfilling a need. But Celia was actually like the love of her life. And the three people actually, out of the two men from the 7 husbands, and then Celia, I believe are the people who Evelyn loved the most. She was obviously in love with Don, the guy who used to beat her. She was obviously in love with Harry, who she married in that 4-couple situation because he was her best friend. And obviously she really loved Celia. I think everybody else just happened to be, they were casualties at war, you know. So yeah, her relationship with Celia was interesting that way because Celia, I felt like she was spiteful and she didn't seem like I don't know, I think it was just love. That's the interesting thing about it. It was just love. There was nothing, oh, this person is doing this for me, or this person is, there was nothing that I could see was, you know, from the relationship and the way that they explained it, that Celia was doing for her. They supported each other in a way. But I don't necessarily think in any way that any other person would, but it just only made sense because of love, and I thought that was kind of beautiful, I guess. So yeah, at the end, she finally decided to reconnect with Celia when she divorced the guy who loved her, claimed to love her because she was somebody nice to look at the hand. I remember even when she married that guy and she woke up in the morning, and obviously he's always used to seeing her with all makeup and looking all fancy like a star. And she woke up that morning, and I think there was a comment about how he looked at her and thought, oh God. Not like in those exact words, but it was like a, is this how it is? Which like continues to like sort of explain further how much he just loved the idea of her. What else? I think that was it basically. She got back with Celia, and she ended up marrying Celia's cousin again, because you still weren't allowed to, you know, be with women in that time and age. And that was Celia's idea. Obviously she didn't do anything with the cousin this time, thank God for that. But yes, Celia revealed that she had, I believe, cancer, lung cancer, something like that, some disease, and she was dying. So she basically, the last time when she was actually with Celia for good was when she was dying. And I think it said a lot as well about taking opportunity and using and seizing opportunity with the people that you love. I think a lot of the times we say this, we know this a lot of the times, but life isn't very guaranteed. And when you love someone and they're generally good for you, I hope, I think it's taking advantage of the opportunity that you have to be with them, because you might not have that for the 10, 20, 50, 100 years that you think you will do in your mind. And so yeah, it was kind of beautiful. I think the worst thing as well was that her daughter Connor died. Her daughter had some form of cancer as well, and died, and Harry died. And I think, oh, there was a way that she also explained how she felt when Celia died, and when Harry, her best friend, died, and when her daughter Connor died. Harry, I can't remember who died first. I believe Harry died first, maybe, I can't remember, but he was in an accident. He was driving drunk, and he was in an accident and killed somebody in that accident, which was the biggest plot twist of the book. He killed somebody in that car when he was driving, and the person was dead on spot. He made it to the hospital, but he died as well after that. And she talks about how, oh, there's a way she put it, how like when something so bad happens to you, you don't have the luxury of making big reactions. Like, you don't have the luxury of panic. Basically your brain, maybe for her as well, her brain just didn't even go into panic mode. And she talks about when she did feel panic later on, and she called it a luxury. I think at that point, yeah, my heart was breaking so much for her. I think just seeing the loss of going through your life and fighting so much, you know, to come to this place where she won like a few Oscars, like she was quite big. She'd, you know, changed her name, changed her hairstyle, she stopped speaking Spanish, she'd like completely changed herself and just changed so many things about herself, and just because she was trying to get to this level of fame and, you know, away from the life that she was coming from. But I think at those ending stages of her life where she really thought about, I've given up so much, right? I've given up everything. I'm working so hard. I've done everything that they said I couldn't do. I've proved myself. I've learned how to act. I've done all these things. I have all this amount of wealth. But everything that she loved, everyone that she loved was gone. It was so sad. I think when that happened, I think maybe it was when Harry died or Celia died, I don't know. I had to just take a break from the book. Because I was like, this is just so sad. I can't cope. But yeah, and then obviously after those things happen, it takes you now to where we are back again with Monique, where Evelyn has lived all her life and everybody she loves is dead, and she has all this money, and she's like, yeah, what am I gonna do with it? And obviously she's gifting her story to Monique for free, for Monique to use. Now the final plot twist of it is that the guy that was in the car when Harry was in an accident, when Harry was drink driving, they made it in the papers to look like it was the guy that was driving and drink driving or drunk driving and then had an accident, whereas it was Harry that was driving, because all through the book they sort of alluded to the fact that Evelyn had a connection with this Monique, and I was thinking, oh yeah, definitely it's her child or like a grandchild or something. But then obviously her child died, so I was just like, oh, how does that work? It turns out that she is the daughter of the man who was in the passenger seat when Harry was drunk driving and killed him. Anyway, so Monique had grown up thinking that her dad was drunk driving and died in that way, not knowing that her dad was drunk driving, was in the passenger seat with Harry because he was Harry's boyfriend at the time. Harry had told Evelyn, the main woman in the book, that he had found somebody who they were going to be in that 4-couple situation again, and that he's still trying to set it all up because he's really, really in love again. So Harry was really, really in love with this guy who is Monique's father. That was the negative part, that he was having an affair, but the good part was knowing that her dad was not a drunk driver that she thought he was. And she hated Evelyn because Evelyn was the person who swapped the news, right, to make it seem like Harry was not the person who was drunk driving. So she hated Evelyn for doing that and making her have to live with this, a bit of like a disdain for her dad, feeling like her dad was a drunk driver when that was not the case. And then you come to the final spoiler of the book, was that Evelyn herself also had cancer, and she was dying. And the reason why she called Monique was it kept mentioning how Monique had written this article about the dignity of dying and the whole concept of allowing people to, I can't remember what the word is, and I remember having a long conversation with my friend about this because I don't know if I should say this, but she had an uncle, I believe, like a relative, decided when he was suffering with cancer that he was going to end his life through like a medical means rather than going through the pain of living with cancer. And so Monique in this book wrote about the dignity of dying, basically, and allowing people to die the way that they want to, and not because you, being their family member, is hanging on to hope for them, but they themselves are feeling the deterioration of what the disease is doing to them. So one of the reasons why Evelyn chose her was because Evelyn herself was going to do that. Evelyn had decided that she was going to medically induce her own death. And she felt comfortable with Monique kind of now knowing that at the end, knowing that Monique understands that because Monique had written about it. It's such a sad book, man. Like, it's just, when I finished, I just thought, life is just so interesting. Oh man, it's just such a sad book. And so yeah, Evelyn didn't explicitly tell her that this is what I'm going to do, but you could tell that she had told Monique that the cancer was eating her up, and at that point Evelyn had lost everybody. And so Monique was even saying that she felt guilty because she wants to tell Evelyn to stop and to live and to, but it's like, at that point, why do that, you know? So yeah, I feel like I almost like I know so much more because of this book and because of some of the things that were said in this book. Yeah, I feel so much more enlightened. I feel like an enlightened person because of this book, and I'm really grateful for it. Honestly, I really am. I feel like I want to read again. I feel like I want to gift it to somebody. I feel like more and more people need to read the book. More and more people need to like hear like the stories and how rich like the stories are. I remember Adrian Houghton, who by loan at the time, who was on The Real, saying how people also always to judge her mom for marrying 3 men because her mom was on her 3rd marriage, and how saying that if you really listen to her mom's story, like, you would understand why her mom married 3 men or was in her 3rd marriage. And because of her dad, one of the relationships, she'd married someone when she was too young and she was pressured to get married at that point or something, and she didn't love the person, and so she got divorced, and then she married the 2nd guy. I think the guy was abusive to her, and obviously she had to leave and then ended up in a 3rd marriage or something like that. And I find that the same is really true for this. Because when you read the book, you understand why Evelyn had 7 husbands. Like, you really do, and you're like, wow, I get it. Like, it made sense. The first one was just you know, somebody that she needed at the time. The 2nd one was beating her up. The 3rd one was, so you really get to understand it. So I think it's more of like a note to myself to really take the time, which I feel like I don't do enough, to really take the time to understand, or if to give grace, because I maybe can't or don't know somebody's full story, and you're not always going to get someone's autobiography, right? Know someone's full story rather than maybe not necessarily judging them, but like shunning or like having like a not attitude, but like, I don't know how to explain, but you know what I'm saying, basically, that there's always a story, and until you know the story, you cannot really judge, basically, is what I'm trying to say at the end of the day. So, have you read The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo? If you have, let me know. Share with me in the comments what you like about it, what you thought about the book, how it's interesting, how it's not. I really love that book, and it's going to be on my pick it up again one day list. Same with Americana from Chimamanda. All right, thank you so much for watching this video. I will see you somewhere in the space sometime soon. The sun is setting. My camera is doing a good job at hiding that, but the sun is setting and I really do have to bounce. Bye.